Welcome to my second lecture on the Slav defense. I know the first one, probably the variation was not the most exciting. Maybe that video won't be extremely well watched except for the beginning. But now I want to cover two variations. One with what is called the Slav defense declined and the Slav defense accepted. And the Slav defense accepted is usually the main line. If you don't know, usually the Slav defense may transpose into the semi-Slav, which I'm going to cover in my next couple of lectures. But the Slav defense is a Queen's Gambit opening, so that's D4, D5, C4, and then the Slav defense C6, and then the common moves are knight to C3, knight F6, and then I already covered where the declined now from here is where white takes. So what about the declined variation? Well, the declined variation is where white plays E3. So decline meaning it doesn't take the pawn. And so basically here, white is choosing to lock this bishop in and to free this bishop here. And it helps, the pawn move also helps to support D4. So it sort of comes with some pluses and some minuses for white. Somewhat, I consider it somewhat of a passive move. So how does black normally respond? Well, black normally responds bishop F5. And if you don't, or maybe if you notice in the last lecture that I usually say the Slav defense is characterized by really development of the bishop to here, and then E6. These are very common moves. And we'll notice in the semi-Slav, just as sort of future reference, that this bishop actually ends up staying on its home square, and then we end up moving here. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but in the Slav defense, you really see this move, bishop to F5, and then E6. Basically getting this bishop outside of the pawn chain where it can actually do some work. So white will continue knight to C3, basically with the goal of, like I said, one of the goals of white is to play E4. And now black will play E6, basically freeing this black bishop. And if it had played E6 before, we'd actually have a this bishop were back here, could actually have more of a semi-Slav, which I'll cover. So now what happens? Well, and then the decline, basically now, well, gee, I'm getting ahead of myself. So what is the strategy? Well, now the strategy is going to be this bishop is no longer on this sort of queen side of the board. So white is going to say, well, great, I'm going to take advantage of that. Well, two things. I'm going to take advantage of that this bishop is now missing from over here, hoping to defend, so I can attack over on the queen side. But also, I'm going to be able to capture that bishop, and then white will say, I'll have the two bishops, which the bishop pair it's called is usually an advantage. So that's going to be white's sort of strategic goal. So with that strategy, white's next move is quite obvious. Or why does white play the next move? Knight to E4. Well, now this bishop is a goner. Anywhere where it goes, it's a goner. And then black's going to move it back to basically, it doesn't want to sit on this square where it's going to have to be, forced to be recaptured with this pawn. So it's going to make the recapture a little bit better for black's pawn structure. And then the white will take the bishop and then capture back with the H pawn. Sort of rule of thumb, not always true, but they usually say capture towards the center. And here, Also, this file is now open for black. Hopefully can make use of it. So if you think about it, if I were black, I could tell myself, well, if white was going to capture castle to the king's side, I could castle queen's side and then have this open file for attack, but we'll see how it works. But just sort of some strategy now. The black has an open file, and now white is going to play d2. If you don't know variations of this variation, you can see white and black both castling to either side of the board depending on how the moves go. But this is a move that's saying, hey, probably gonna castle queen side because white is starting to move the pieces off the queen side, aiding and castling. Let's see, next white will play knight on b to d7, wants to develop its pieces. Also, black may be considering castling queen side, so it also wants to develop its pieces on that side so it can castle the king. And the most logical place for the knight to develop is to d7. And then white plays knight to b3, obviously attacking this pawn. Also moving, now white is free to clear or castle king side. Black will play queen to b6, obviously clearing the queen and also protecting this pawn here, and then sort of saying, probably neither side wants to really capture the queen, because if whatever side captures, the other side's going to capture with their respective pawn and have an open file for their rook. And then the queens would be off the board. So open lines are great. They're great for attacking with the rooks. So neither side probably wants to exchange the queens. And now white plays h3. Basically, this pawn was somewhat of a target on h2 if black was developed. The bishop here could always attack it twice. Also prevents the knight from coming in here. So sort of a dual purpose move. And I'm going to end it right there with that variation. And now I'm going to back up and show you the last variation. I don't have too much time left, so let me back up to the beginning. Sorry if that was a little quick. So the last variation is the main variation where white plays knight to c3 once again, developing a piece, hopefully going to push e4 or move e4. Black takes. Basically what black is giving the center up, but it's banking on the fact that now white is going to have to make a few extra moves, sort of hindering its development, and then black can make use of that. Because now, if you don't know, white has to play e4, because if black plays b5, it actually won a pawn. So this move, white has to play a4, or white will play b5, and they got that pawn for free, unlike in the Queen's Gambit. So so it surrenders the center, but it forces white to make a move, and it's not a developing move. Then black will play bishop to f5. I've already covered this move. And now white will play e3, choosing the block in its own black bishop, or the bishop on c3, but opening up the line for the bishop on f1 to capture the pawn. Black is going to play e6, freeing the black bishop, the bishop on f8, and then white will capture the pawn. And now black will pin the bishop, pin the knight, because one of its goals is it wants to get that pawn, to play e4. White will castle, breaking the pin. Black plays knight on b to d7. And I'm almost out of time with this lecture. Queen to e2. Basically, white is preparing to push e4. Black will castle. White pushes e4, and the bishop is forced to go back. That's the end of this lecture.